Gone. I found someone who appreciates me and already moved your belongings to storage. My name is Marcus Brenner, 52 years old and staring at my phone in the living room of our Seattle townhouse at 10:38 p.m. on a Tuesday. My wife, Elise, was supposedly on day 3 of a business conference in Chicago. The text came with a screenshot of a bank transfer, $134,000 moved from our joint savings to her personal account. I set my phone down and finished my tea. 17 years of marriage concluded in 2 sentences and a screenshot. For months, there had been indicators. Business trips that inexplicably extended. Expensive purchases that never appeared at home. Phone conversations that abruptly ended when I walked into the room. I observed it all. As a financial investigator for insurance companies, detecting inconsistencies is literally what I do for a living. But I remained silent. Perhaps that was my initial error. Or maybe my first mistake was marrying someone who dismissed my profession as just paperwork and boring financial stuff. I opened my laptop and checked one of my email accounts, one Elise had no knowledge of, for notifications from my bank's security system. Someone had attempted to modify passwords on accounts Elise wasn't aware existed. She was being meticulous. I had to acknowledge her thoroughness. I picked up my phone and typed 2 words in response, as expected. Then I called my sister Nora. "Remember that precautionary arrangement we discussed 4 years ago?" I said when she answered. "It's time." "Are you certain?" she asked. "Yes," I replied. She just made her move. I hung up and glanced at the wedding photo on the bookshelf. It was the only picture in the townhouse that still featured both of us. I should have noticed that telling detail as well. I met Elise Harrington at a charity fundraiser for the Seattle Symphony. I was 35, recently divorced from a brief first marriage, and entirely focused on building my financial investigation practice. Elise was 32, charismatic, driven, and completely uninterested in understanding what I did professionally. "I don't need to know the specifics," she'd say whenever I attempted to explain a case. "As long as we can afford the lifestyle I want." We married after 14 months of dating. I helped her establish her interior design business, investing entirely from my savings. When she wanted a more prestigious address and upscale neighborhood, I agreed. When she desired luxury travel and designer clothes, I nodded and signed the checks. My mother had cautioned me once when we were sorting through family photographs. She paused, old album in hand. "Marcus, I notice your wife spends a great deal of your money," she said carefully. "Just ensure she values what you sacrifice to earn it." I dismissed her concern, but the observation lingered. 7 years into our marriage, I began quietly reorganizing my assets. Nothing illegal, just protective. I established 3 separate limited liability companies, created trusts, invested in diverse cryptocurrencies, and maintained separate accounts for international clients. Elise knew about our joint checking and savings, but nothing more. I watched as she became increasingly involved in design influencer circles. Her social media following grew into tens of thousands. She started taking trips with her creative community, first weekends, then entire weeks. "You wouldn't enjoy it," she'd insist. "It's all fabric swatches and lighting discussions." Last Thanksgiving, she forgot our anniversary. When I mentioned it the following day, she purchased an expensive watch and said, "I've just been overwhelmed with the new design showcase." I accepted the watch, but that night I finalized the documents for my contingency strategy. The warning signs were abundant. I simply refused to acknowledge the complete picture. The morning after her text, I woke early and brewed coffee. Same as always. Routines persist even when your world implodes. I logged into my primary financial management system, custom designed for my practice but adapted for personal use. With several precise commands, I activated the contingency protocol Nora and I had designed years earlier. First, I froze all joint accounts and credit cards. Then I triggered a fraud alert on the $134,000 transfer, leveraging my banking contacts to expedite the process. I sent evidence documenting financial misconduct to my attorney, with instructions to file for divorce immediately. Then I called my brother. "Elise has left me," I said plainly. "She took substantial funds and removed my belongings while supposedly attending a conference." My brother was quiet momentarily. "I'm sorry, Marcus," he finally said, "but I can't claim I'm shocked." "What will you do next?" "What I've been preparing to do for years," I replied. "Secure what's rightfully mine." An hour later, My phone lit up with Elise's name. I declined the call. 12 more calls followed. Then a text. What the hell have you done? The money's gone and my cards aren't working. I didn't respond. Instead, I drove to the storage facility mentioned in her text, using the access code she'd sent. I retrieved 2 boxes of my clothes and my work laptop. The rest of my possessions, family heirlooms, books, mementos from my grandfather, were nowhere to be found. That's when something crystallized within me. This wasn't merely about finances anymore. It was about 17 years discarded thoughtlessly. It was about someone believing they could erase my existence from my own life. I stopped at a local cafe and opened my laptop. Using financial databases only accessible to licensed investigators, I researched everything available on Reed Blackwell. The interior design influencer Elise had been tagging in photos for months. There's someone who appreciates me, she'd referenced. What I discovered confirmed my suspicions. Reed's design consultancy was leveraged to insolvency. For maxed-out business credit lines, a commercial lease he couldn't sustain, and Elise had already co-signed on a studio mortgage with him 3 months earlier. I closed my laptop and drove to a hotel for the first time in years. I felt absolute clarity about the necessary actions. I wasn't angry anymore. I was strategic. Monday morning, I entered my office as though nothing had changed. My executive assistant, Margaret, looked up, surprised. Marcus, I thought you'd be taking personal time. Elise called here 4 times already. Did she? I said. Not a question. She sounded distressed. Said there was a misunderstanding with your accounts and needed to contact you urgently. I nodded. If she calls again, direct her to my attorney. By midday, Elise had escalated from calls to appearing in person. The receptionist alerted my office. Your wife is here. She's quite insistent. I sighed and walked to the reception area. Elise stood there, designer sunglasses pushed back on her head, in an impeccably tailored outfit. She smiled when she saw me, the same smile she'd employed for 17 years when she wanted something. Marcus, there's been a massive misunderstanding with the bank, she said, loudly enough for everyone to hear. All our accounts are frozen. Not a misunderstanding, I said quietly. You transferred funds without authorization. The bank flagged it as fraud. Her smile faltered. It was our joint account. I'm your wife. You're my soon-to-be ex-wife who emptied our savings while informing me you'd moved out and found someone new. That's textbook financial misconduct. Her voice dropped to a whisper. You cannot do this to me. I've already made deposits on a new place. I've made commitments to Reed Blackwell. Yes, I know all about those commitments. Her face paled. You're investigating me? No. Just protecting myself from fraud. I'll fight this, she snapped. I deserve half of everything. I looked at her evenly. Half of what's in those accounts? Certainly. But you seem to operate under the misconception that's all there is. She blinked, confused. What are you talking about? You'll discover that during legal proceedings, I said, then turned and walked back to my office. That afternoon, I received an email from Elise's newly retained attorney demanding immediate access to all financial records and threatening to expose irregularities in my accounting practice if I didn't comply. It was an amateur tactic, a threat with no foundation. I forwarded it to my attorney with one line, proceed as planned. By evening, Elise had mobilized mutual friends to her defense. My phone filled with messages asking why I was being vindictive and controlling. No one questioned where she'd been the past week or who she'd been with. No one asked about the money she'd taken. I didn't bother responding. Instead, I went to my regular gym, not Elise's exclusive fitness club or Reed's trendy wellness center, but the modest community facility where I'd been training for years. I completed my usual workout until my muscles ached, then drove back to my hotel room. The trap was closing, but not around me. 3 days later, my attorney called. We found something significant, she said. Elise has been diverting money from your joint account for over a year. Small transfers initially, then larger ones. To where? I asked, though I already knew. Multiple destinations, some to her personal savings, but primarily to a business LLC registered to Reed Blackwell. Almost $95,000 total, using your joint funds as the source. Yes, which means we can add financial infidelity to the divorce filing. I thanked her and hung up. I wasn't surprised, but confirmation still felt like a physical blow. Elise hadn't simply left me for someone else. She'd been planning it for over a year, funding her exit and her new partner's business with my money. That night, I received a text from an unknown number. You need to back off. Elise deserves better than you. Don't make this messier than necessary. Read Blackwell engaging directly. Interesting. I drove to my sister's house the next morning. Nora worked in digital security, the perfect complement to my financial expertise. We collaborated on cases before, but this was different. I need everything you can legally find on Blackwell Design LLC, I told her. Banking records, loans, credit applications, everything. Nora raised an eyebrow. Legal channels only, right? Of course. We're just connecting public information more efficiently than most could. 3 hours later, we had our answer. Reed Blackwell wasn't just in debt, he was financially underwater. His social media portrayed affluence and success, but his business was failing. The luxury studio, the high-end furnishings, the designer showcases, all funded through predatory loans and, more recently, Elise's investments. But there was something else. Something Elise couldn't have known. Look at this, Nora said, pointing to her screen. Blackwell applied for a business expansion loan 3 months ago. Used the studio furnishings as collateral. That's standard, I said. Yes, but look who co-signed. I leaned forward. The documents show Elise's signature on a $215,000 commercial property loan she co-signed before she left you, Nora said quietly. But here's the critical part. The loan specifies joint responsibility with her spouse. They leveraged her marital status to secure favorable terms. I stared at the screen. She placed my assets at risk for his loan without my knowledge. Exactly. And there's more, for credit lines, a commercial lease, and the new showroom rental all co-signed by Elise. All using your marital assets as security. I stood and walked to the window. Outside, a family was walking their dog, blissfully unaware of the complexities of adult relationships. She has no comprehension of what she's done, I said finally. And neither does he. The next morning, I met with my attorney and presented everything we'd discovered. I want to move expeditiously, I told her. Before they realized the implications. She reviewed the documents and nodded. We'll file for emergency asset protection today. The loan fraud alone is sufficient to freeze everything until the divorce is finalized. That afternoon, I drove to Blackwell Design Studio. The space was elegant and minimalist, with inspirational design quotes on the walls and Reed's image prominently featured throughout the entrance. Inside, young professionals in fashionable attire took photos between client consultations. Reed noticed me immediately. He was more polished in person, with the perfect haircut and tailored clothing of someone who'd built their career on aesthetics. He approached with a carefully calibrated smile. You must be Marcus, he said. Elise has mentioned you. I'm certain she has, I replied, not accepting his extended hand. We need to speak privately. His smile wavered, but he led me to his office, glass-walled, visible to everyone but soundproof. How can I assist you? He asked, closing the door. I placed a folder on his desk. This contains every financial document connecting you to Elise. Loans, credit lines, leases, all co-signed using our marital assets as security. He picked up the folder cautiously. I don't understand. It's straightforward. Elise used our marriage to guarantee your business loans. Now we're divorcing and those guarantees are compromised. The color drained from his face as he reviewed the pages. These are all legitimate business arrangements between Elise and me. Perhaps, but the banks approved them based on our combined assets and income, assets she no longer has access to. He closed the folder. What do you want? Nothing from you. I simply thought you should know what's coming. The banks will be calling those loans due very soon. Elise said you were financially secure, he said, voice hardening. That money wasn't an issue for you. Money has never been the issue, I replied. Trust was. I stood to leave but paused at the door. One more thing. When Elise moved out, she took items of significant sentimental value to me. Family photographs, my grandfather's pocket watch, things money cannot replace. He stared at me for a prolonged moment. I'll see what I can do. I nodded and departed. The next day, a courier delivered a package to my hotel. Inside were the missing photographs, my grandfather's watch, and other personal items. No note was included. That same afternoon, my attorney confirmed the emergency asset protection had been granted. All shared assets would remain frozen until the divorce was finalized. I logged into my financial management system and reviewed the alerts. Elise had attempted to access our frozen accounts 21 times in the past 24 hours. She'd also tried to open a new equity line using our home as collateral. Denied. My phone illuminated with her name again. This time I answered. "What have you done?" she demanded, voice trembling. The bank recalled Reed's loans. All of them. They're seizing the studio furnishings tomorrow. That's unfortunate, I said calmly. This is vindictive, Marcus. You're destroying him to punish me. I'm not doing anything to him. I'm simply protecting myself from fraud. You used our marriage to secure his loans without my knowledge or consent. That's illegal. We can resolve this, she said, voice suddenly softening. Come home. Let's talk. 17 years of marriage, and she still believed I could be manipulated that easily. There's nothing to resolve, I replied. The divorce will proceed, the fraud investigation will continue, and Reed will learn a valuable lesson about proper due diligence. I ended the call and blocked her number. That night, I slept better than I had in months. 3 weeks later, I sat in a conference room as Elise and her attorney arrived for our court-mandated mediation. She looked exhausted, her designer outfit and flawless makeup unable to conceal the strain. Her attorney spoke first. My client is prepared to be reasonable about the division of assets, despite the aggressive tactics employed thus far. My attorney smiled professionally. That's encouraging, because there's been a development. She slid a document across the table. The bank has completed its fraud investigation. They've determined that Elise forged Marcus's signature on multiple loan documents, using their marital assets as collateral without his knowledge. Elise's attorney skimmed the document, face paling. We'll need time to review this. Of course, my attorney said. But you should be aware that the bank has already referred the matter to the district attorney. This meeting is a courtesy before criminal charges are filed. Elise stared at me, eyes wide. Criminal charges? Marcus, you can't be serious. I met her gaze steadily. I didn't file the charges. The bank did. That's what happens when you commit loan fraud. Her attorney whispered something in her ear. She shook her head vehemently. If Ms. Harrington is willing to sign our proposed settlement agreement today, my attorney continued, Marcus is prepared to provide a statement to the bank that could mitigate the criminal implications. He won't press charges for the theft of personal property or the unauthorized transfer from the joint account. I watched as Elise's carefully constructed world collapsed. She'd expected anger, jealousy, perhaps even pleading. She hadn't anticipated the consequences. The settlement is equitable, I said quietly. You keep your design business, which is consistently profitable. You retain your car and personal possessions. You receive no alimony, and you assume responsibility for the debts you incurred in my name with Reed. And Reed, she asked, voice barely audible. Mr. Blackwell's financial challenges are his own concern, my attorney replied. But without your husband's assets backing those loans, I understand the bank has already begun repossession proceedings. Elise signed the papers without further objection. As we left the conference room, she caught my arm. I never imagined you'd respond like this, she said. You always just accommodated everything. That was my choice, I replied. Just as this was yours. I walked away without looking back. A month later, I moved out of the hotel and into a modest craftsman house near Lake Washington. Nothing extravagant, just a solid structure with character that needed renovation. The kind of project that would occupy my hands and mind during the evenings. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Elise had relocated to San Diego to reinvent herself. Her Instagram showcased ocean views and inspirational quotes about resilience and new beginnings. Reed's studio had been acquired by a national design firm, and he'd moved to Los Angeles to expand his brand. Neither mentioned what had transpired. People rarely publicize their failures. My sister Nora visited one Sunday to help me restore the original hardwood floors in the living room. Heard anything from Elise? She asked as we applied the finish. No, I said, and I don't anticipate I will. You could have taken everything from her. The fraud evidence alone would have guaranteed that. I shrugged. What would be the purpose? She's no longer my concern. We worked in comfortable silence for a while, the rhythm of the task creating a meditative state. I'm considering taking some time off, I said eventually. Maybe drive up to the San Juan Islands, do some kayaking at the family cabin. Dad would approve of that, Nora replied. You haven't been there since he passed. That evening, after Nora left, I sat on my deck with a glass of scotch. The neighborhood was peaceful, with only occasional laughter from children playing nearby breaking the stillness. Different from the exclusive community Elise had insisted upon. More authentic, somehow. I reflected on the past 17 years. How I'd allowed someone else to define my existence, my value. How I'd recognized the warning signs but chosen to ignore them. How, when the moment arrived, I'd been prepared because some part of me had always known this day would come. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt liberated. The next morning, I called my office and informed them I'd be taking 3 weeks off. Then I packed my Subaru, secured the house, and headed north. No itinerary, no expectations. Just the open road and the promise of quiet waters. And for the first time in years, no invisible ledger of disappointments to balance.